falcha mór roh a lí. Agus falcha a crí orm sa rih Jim Fitzpatrick. Agus tá my ancestry go raibh Jim an seo agus choirí mé couple ceistena the Jim agus nye meisha mas swail livsha ceist a corn ó rudda a rá Donaghy ar Eilish. So, just to get a sense of Celtic artwork. So, based on Irish legends, based on Cahallan, the Féin, Tuatha Dé Danann, the Fear Bullock. I read that you got some of that when you were a youngster.
Yep.
And weren't well, and your great aunt, was it, and your mother?
Yeah, I had TB. Now, remember my mother's dearest brother, her only brother, died of TB at the age of 21. So obviously she thought I was going to pop my clogs. I knew I wasn't. They just can't get rid of me. And while I was sick, I started getting really interested in, I won't call it Celtic mythology, Celtic stories, tall tales, fairy tales. I got a book by Nuala O'Fhailon, the wife of Sean O'Fhailon, and it was called Early Irish Sagas, I think, in the Drumcondra Library, and that set me off. And then when I went to secondary school, I expected this whole area to open up because I read history ferociously, and here was this hidden history, a mythology, I didn't know the word then, that I didn't understand because we had so little of it. I was taught in Gaeilge the story of the children of Lear with a 6-inch leather strap, and as he'd whack you on the head with it, he'd say, "Vi bríar nairn fadó dar a bhanam Lear." I'll never forget it, and I was only like 7 or 8 at the time. So it wasn't a great introduction to Irish mythology, but when I went to Gormiston College and started studying, I wanted to do history and English as my major subjects. We didn't teach art back then. So there was a paragraph on all the early invasions of Ireland. Now we have to remember we're a polyglot race. We're not this pure white race we all think we are. The first race, the indigenous people who lived in Ireland through the Ice Age, and we know this for a fact, Ireland wasn't covered with ice. The lower part of it was absolutely, what's the word for it, could easily sustain life, it had animal life, it had everything. And also, before the Ice Age, the Irish people were black with blue eyes. We know this because the Brits were the same. After the Ice Age, our skin lightened, vitamin D, is necessary to keep us alive, and our skin became paler and paler. My lot, which are red-haired, I was talking to Gerry about this, were the 5th invasion. So put your minds back to the Ice Age. Ice melts. We know from the bare bones in Áras Uí Cave that have human cut marks on them that we lived in Ireland at the time, and then different people came here. So who were the first inhabitants of Ireland? My theory is North Africans called the Firbolg. Bob Quinn, who's written a series called Atlantean and made 3 films of it, has the same opinion. So there were indigenous people here from the Ice Age, and then interlopers like myself, big tall redheads, arrived about 500 years later and took over the joint. Simple as that.
So you're sick. You're the older women in your life are telling you these stories. You may have picked up all that detail subsequently.
Yeah.
Your father was a photojournalist.
He was a photojournalist with the Independent, but he abandoned us. He was super rich. His father, my grandfather, was a very famous artist called Thomas Fitzpatrick, a cartoonist and political satirist, very anti-British. There's a book written called Apes and Angels about how Tenniel, who illustrated Alice in Wonderland, depicted the Irish as apes, and my grandfather turned that around and pictured the Irish as angels. And he did a very famous cartoon called The English Frankenstein, so you can work your imagination out in that. And remember, Mary Shelley was a huge supporter of Irish independence, as was Pierce Bysshe Shelley, but that's it.
So we're just gliding over the top of this, but you can see early influences being taught about these legends of Irish history, of ancient history.
But I think everybody in Ireland is like a sponge. We absorb so many different versions of history because there are so many different versions of our own history. What I'm trying to do, and was trying to do at the beginning, and what I'm still trying to do, is point out that there are some really significant people, races, who have come here. I call myself Scythian, right? It's just a fantasy. but it's based on genetics. My cousin is Aoife McLysett, who is the geneticist at Trinity College, on an Irish stamp now. She introduced me to Dr. Lara Cassidy. Dr. Lara Cassidy is the only genealogist and geneticist allowed to do DNA sampling of the bones found at Newgrange, and she put them exactly where I've always said our race came from, which is Scythia, which is around the Ukraine. But originally we were from the Holy Land, so we were Hebrews. If you look at the history of Ireland, first Irish High King was Heber Fionn. No, that was his son, sorry. The first Irish king was Eramon. His son was Heber Fionn, which means the fair Hebrew. So we have this mix of, I mentioned, maybe refugees from the persecution of Akhenaten in Egypt and the collapse of the regime of Ankara. His daughter came here by the looks of it, but where did all these Hebrews come from? If you look at redheads, King David was a redhead, we know Jesus was a redhead, the Quran says so. All the pharaohs, Ramses were redheads. If you look at Joseph of the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, his tomb was found 20 years ago, he's a redhead. So that redhead gene comes from the Holy Land. That's why I always argue about the present Israeli regime. They don't allow DNA tests for a very good reason. They're not what I would call indigenous Jewish people or Hebrews. We won't get into that.
I will come back on that
If
later
you want,
on.
yeah, I'll happily talk about it.
But when did you start to draw or paint, or when did you just, as a child, do
I was
did you-
drawing from the minute I was born. The very first drawing I did is a very famous incident that nobody remembers. We lived in Skerries. I looked out the window. There was a lightning storm. I was terrified. My mother was terrified. But I was fascinated. I could see a light. What I now know is ball lightning. We call it an orb today, but it was ball lightning. And at the same time, a ship was sunk. It's not a ship, a yacht with two men in it, and they were drowned. And my very first drawing, I always remember, was the lifeboat that had a big kind of, I suppose, a searchlight on it, and the beam was cutting through the sea spray, and it's not clear sky. It was just mesmerizing. And that was my first drawing. And I painted it in. My mother said to me, why are you always putting lines around everything? Because I'd even paint it and then draw it, put lines on it. And I was saying, well, it's to hold the painting in. That became the way I drew by accident or by instinct. I couldn't tell you which. Like I said, my grandfather was a line illustrative kind of draftsman, brilliant. But he wasn't around to teach me. He died in 1912. I was fanatically interested in the art of drawing, but I had no books, no instructions, no mentors, till I went to St. Patrick's School in Drumcondra, where a very kind teacher, Mr. Kleins, his daughter got in touch many years ago because I mentioned him on the radio. He caught me drawing a comic book on brown paper from a paper bag that I folded and stapled. And first of all, he brought me up to give me the straps. And then when he finished the straps, he said, before he did it, he said, I always remember this is going to hurt me more than it hurt you. Because he was a good man, he didn't like doing this crap. Anyway, one day he came up to me and he caught me drawing during religious class, and he whispered, he said, carry on, Mr. Fitzpatrick. And that's how I started drawing. I drew everything for that college, like art competitions, you name it. When I went to secondary school, the same thing. Father Louis, my teacher who died only 4 months ago, went to his funeral. He gave me art books on, now you'd be arrested, on physical proportions of the male and female. Anatomy books, nothing sexual, just anatomy books. And that led me on another path. He gave me books by artists like Michelangelo and, I can't pronounce his name, Magenta, who did these etchings with powerful physiques of men. I got fascinated by male bodies and their forms, and that's when I started drawing these kind of warriors. So it all led from there, but it was inside me from the time I listened to my aunt, from the time I spent in County Clare with my aunt, who one of the best times of my life, and heard all the stories firsthand of what I call the pishokes, the superstitions of the countryside, and I was absorbed in them as anybody else was. And she had command over animals. Like the ducks used to follow her in a line. She had cows she would never allow to be slaughtered. They were ancient, and I used to ride one of the sows first, and then one of the little calves. So that brought in the magic. The mythology became real for me then, even though I didn't know what mythology was. It was folklore, it was pishokes, it was superstitions. So this was part of growing up. My mother was from Clare, my aunts were from Clare. Clare is full of rich storytellers, and I think that's where it got into me.
And then you did a number of books, but you also produced countless prints, particularly in the 70s,
Yeah,
some of which you showed.
sure.
Where did that notion come from? Was that
What happened was, I was working in advertising. I was one of the highest paid people in the country. I always bragged to myself that I was earning more than the president at the time. And I decided to pack it in. I wanted to be an artist. I had no commissions, no nothing, but I thought, I know loads of people who'll help me. And then we had a thing called the petrol crisis, where you had to queue for petrol. The economy collapsed, nobody was commissioning work. So I made up a package of all my posters that I'd done then, folded them all, put them in an A4 envelope and sent them out with the help of a thing called the Artists and Writers Yearbook. It gave me all the addresses. I got a flood of rejection slips from publishers. I got one or two words of encouragement, and then I got a letter from a man called Alan Aldridge, one of my heroes, who did work for the Beatles. He did all the covers. He was revolutionary. He changed the whole look of Penguin books from those sort of bands of orange. And Alan said he was starting up an artist agency and wanted me to join. I was like, whoa. And they flew me over, and I joined. And they gave me a publisher then called Motif Editions, and they wanted to do posters of my work. I'd done posters in Dublin already, but now I had an English publisher with vast reach. So I did a lot of posters with them, and that led me to a Dutch publisher called Verkerk. I would do posters for anybody. Yeah. I just love the form, and still do.
You've already dealt with what's essentially a legend, the story of how you came to do this famous print of Che Guevara, which is based on a photograph by
Corda.
Alfredo Corda, right? I mean, and I one of the few times I actually wrote to the GPO in Dublin when they produced a stamp and asked them to send me a first day cover, which they dutifully did, and which I have.
I have to compliment you. Just reminded me, the only card I ever got with a Che stamp on it was from you. I was delighted. It was on a stamp. It was on a card, and it was real. It was posted as opposed to sitting pretty in my front room.
So I also, when I was doing these copious notes, which you can see, was going to ask you about meeting Che Guevara in the hotel. And
well, you're welcome to follow up any questions. If anybody has any questions on that.
Well, we'll invite people in and all of that. And then you've dealt with all of the covers that you did for Thin Lizzy and for.
I was quite prolific back then. I was working for a lot of different bands, you see, and I worked for an English rock band from Sheffield called Hackensack. Very heavy metal. I love heavy metal still. And Philip tapped me on the shoulder and said, Jim, you were playing Sheffield and your posters are all over the place there. You're working for us from now on. I'll make sure you get paid. And he did. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I really like, and I'm going to take you through this for a moment or two, is how your art, particularly here in Belfast, became part of life. On gabled walls.
During the Troubles, yeah?
Yeah. Just, I mean, amazing. Like Macara Kelly from Spring Hill.
I know him well, yeah.
I'm sure Bill has a photograph of it somewhere, the huge, like 3-story high mural.
I knew the mural, yeah.
Yeah, and then I brought this in just to show you, because prisoners...
The British Army used to take pot shots at it, and then somebody threw a can of paint at it.
Prisoners used to paint on wood, on handkerchiefs. This is done by a guy called Alex Crowe in Cage 11. Alex gave it to me in
I haven't seen that before.
1974. This is a long cache tile. This blue
I see.
material. That's on the wall at our house. I just took it down to bring to you. I'm going to ask you to sign it.
It's a beautiful piece of work. Yeah, it's not my work. It's a combination of different elements of my work.
Well, Alex claims it was yours.
Oh no, it is. Yeah, but I'm just saying he's done something different with it.
Yeah. So and I'm sure there's other former prisoners here who cogged your work and put it in all sorts
of. I have 2 mirrors that you gave me, Gerry, from back then.
Yeah. And then it must be edifying. you know, when you see something that you have done,
Oh,
and then here you are, like
Yeah.
this is nearly 50 years
I
later.
couldn't explain what it feels like. I mean,
Yeah.
the guy here is on with the tattoos.
Yeah, it's
Is
John
that you with the
McDermott.
tattoos in my work?
John McDermott just run the marathon in New York at the weekend there, and then flew here
Really?
to be here
Right,
with
well
you
done,
because
yeah.
he's representing the Strabane Loyal Tattooists Club.
Are there some of them here? Some of you guys tattooists?
Yeah, so
I love tattoos. Beautiful work. I love it. But to see your work on people, to see your work done by other people, it is extraordinarily rewarding. I mean, it feels
of
good
course,
for the
no,
soul.
no, absolutely, yeah, no, I
No,
can
because you're
appreciate
doing
that.
something positive with your life.
Right. Okay, so what is the role of the artist in society?
Nowadays, keep their mouth shut.
So what is the role of the artist who have balls?
Well, Bobby Balla, I think, was there before. I know I was first with the Che, but I'm talking politically now, and the North. He was well on tune long before me. I'm a pacifist, so I had different issues, but we've always been friends, and, Bobby Balla, I think, gave Philip Land his first guitar, I think, a Fender, as far as I remember. But Bobby, I think, led the way with political work. I was reticent because I'm so well known for the Che, and because I have friends on the other side as well. I didn't want to, cause division. I'm a great believer in, you saw the work there, the Critchen for Ian Adamson. That was a deliberate attempt to let the loyalist, unionist people of Northern Ireland, and I don't want to lecture them, I'm a southerner, know that they had a culture as well. Lily Balair of Ballinanlaw. Ballinanlaw simply means Chucky our law, our day will come. And it's to let them know that they have a Scots roots, but it's Irish as well. But we don't call it Irish, I think we should call it Gaelic, because that seems to be more acceptable. So what I'm trying to say is, I love working with people who are trying to bring people together. And I mentioned Gerry, David Irvin. Blessed are the peacemakers. What more can I say? I'm not a peacemaker. I try to bring people together, but I don't have that huge influence. But I always hope my work is never divisive, like singling off somebody and saying we are pure racial, ethnic, these sort of redheads and freckly and blonde and whites and all that sort of stuff. I'm a great friend of Emma DeBerry. I don't know if you know her, an Irish writer, incredible. She's on English television all the time. They've adopted her. And she is a very proud Irish woman who's now accused me of putting her down the rabbit hole of the Egyptians in Ireland. She wants to write about them. So, in small ways, you can influence what people perceive Ireland to be outside and show them we have a rich cultural heritage. One of the things that prompted me, and I've forgotten about this, was that I'm a big comic collector. And I met the great Jack Kirby, who was very complimentary about me, very kind words, and invited me to dinner with his wife. Jack Kirby invented Marvel Comics. He invented a culture, and that culture is now, as you can see in Hollywood, dominant. All the characters he created are modern mythology. And I remember talking to him about Irish mythology. He knew all about it, but nobody ever went there. There's never been an Irish mythological comic book that I'm aware of. I should confess, a comic series for the Sunday Independent. That was weird, for want of a better word.
Well, when you describe the role of the artist in a more general sense, the popularization of your art in the streets here and in the prisons here, it isn't just an endorsement and, I suppose, in many ways, a recognition of.
Well, it's a political statement.
Yes, but
Like these are our roots.
yes, but it also lifts people.
Yeah, I hope so.
It gives people. Bobby Sands wrote, "The men of art have lost their hearts."
Yeah, I remember that well.
Right.
I remember when I read that, I thought, because I have to be honest, I worked for Hibernian magazine, I worked for a lot of political magazines, but the North, because it was so volatile and because of my background, I really felt, I'm not someone who knows enough that I should stay out. I think, I was great friends with people like Gerry here throughout the war, and I learned a lot from them as well, that there's other perspectives. But I'm not here to be judgmental ever of anybody. I'd hate anybody to be judgmental of me. But I think art is something that, I don't want to say it should unite people, it sounds preposterous and pretentious, but something in art, I think, it's the cradle of who we are. It is our reflection of ourselves. And what I wanted to reflect was a much deeper reflection of our race. I grew up with Kevin Barry, you know, just a lad of 18 summers. I knew all the songs by heart, Kelly the Boy from Killaan. But there's a beautiful underlay to all this that is not nationalistic, that is not belonging just to us. It's pan-European, it's pan-world. But it's a mythology that is exclusive to Ireland. And it's very different from any other mythology. It's much, Jacobson, the great scholar in the last century, called it the earliest voice of human civilization, the earliest voice of Western civilization. So that's how far back our myths go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I shouldn't have used that term I used earlier on. Apologies when I said artists who had balls, but what I mean is artists who are prepared to stand above the parapet.
The women in my family would agree with you, because they had balls.
Right. So, what would your advice be to young artists who want to push the envelope out, who want to...
Well, I've got two in my hands here, so I have to give them good advice. Would they listen? I wouldn't. But no, I think what you got to do is be true to yourself, and believe me, it's the hardest thing in the world. I'll give you a quick example. I did a little interview with a student, and she put it up on her Instagram and TikTok. And it was one of the best interviews I've ever done, because she asked me about being an artist. And I came out with all wonderful stuff. It was about never giving up, never giving in, never giving in to depression, never giving in to self-doubt, never give in to anything. If you do, as all my friends have done, you'll end up dead. A lot of them have committed suicide. It's the burden. You've got to fight all the way, because what you've got is so exceptional. It's an inner, what's the word for it? It's your soul being manifest. You're putting it out there for everybody to look at. And that can be scary. And sometimes you do wonderful work, and sometimes you do absolute crap. You don't know which is which until somebody points it out. It's usually my kids saying, holy God. I did 2 verses of Gerry before I got them right, by the way, because my kids went, what? Yeah. I'll show you them sometimes. You look kind of sinister in them. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that to be an artist, you've got to have enormous self-belief, and you've got to stay with it to the bitter end, because God knows what you would contribute if you do.
Yeah.
Simple as that. You know?
Good advice. Okay, I'm going to go around the room, and I'm just picking this guy because when we were doing the launch of Elizabeth Farrell down in the Mansion House,
Yeah.
John McDermott came down from Strabane to get a print and to be at it, and this was done by Jim to help the campaign to save Moore Street and to have a Caharu, a quarter, a 1916 quarter built there. It's the last standpoint of the men and women who were in the GPO,
Yeah.
and so on. So John came down, and we discovered that he's covered in tattoos of Jim Fitzpatrick's work, which to me was a revelation that somebody would go as far as that. So I'm going to give John the first question, observation.
Cheers,
or if you want to take off your t-shirt.
We need to pay extra for that.
The poor man, we're at a gig, and I see him there, and I say, quick, I want to take pictures of everything. I think I had him wearing these clothes off.
Gerry discovered, I didn't discover. But no, I have two quick things, maybe one comment and then one question, just to go back to the Che thing. I think that for me, the reason I like the art and the reason I have it tattooed on me, I think that for me growing up, you're sitting on for me it was my grandfather's lap, you're hearing stories about Cuchulainn, you're hearing stories about Finn McCool, Children of Lear. Some of those stories are heavy enough, and you're able to bring like that imagery to life in a way that's easily digestible. And I think that for me, I have children now, I read them the stories, I've got your books, and I think just to show that imagery in a way that's really easy for them to understand. As I say, the Children of Lear story is quite a heavy hitting story, but
They're nasty stories if you read them properly.
Yeah, you brought that to light. So yeah, thanks for that. And you made maybe a bit of a throwaway comment that you still kind of stuff that no one wants to see. I think there'd be a lot of people that would be interested to take a look in your attic and to not do yourself too much injustice there. But just a quick one back on the Che Guevara, I'd be interested just to know the image that we see now is it's iconic, but whenever you're looking at him, how much does that bear resemblance to him? What's the conversation like? Maybe even a quick step through
When
that
I met
conversation.
him, he would have looked more like Colin Farrell. He had a big mane of hair. He hadn't got the beret on. He had a London Fog kind of trench coat, you know, with epaulets, kind of olive greeny colour. He was wearing black boots. He was kind of military, but not casual military, for want of a better word. Now that I know about fashion, I wouldn't have known at the time. He looked different from everybody else I've seen come into the bar. And the only other person there was an old guy called Sam, who was always in the bar. And when I told this story, when I was with Che Guevara down in the same hotel, somebody put up their hand and said, "Oh, that's my Uncle Sam. I remember him well." He was a lovely guy. He kept me amused. Because sitting in the bar on your own is boring in the morning, you know. And the whole Che experience, when I look back on it now, is quite extraordinary. And I hate to tell you, when I went, I wasn't the only one there. There was another guy called Gilbert Brosnan was with me, and he lives up the hill from me in Hope. And nobody's ever interviewed him, and I hadn't either. And one day I'm going with my son, walking by a cafe in a shopping market, in a supermarket in Hope, and he's sitting there. So we went out, and my son recorded and filmed him, because he's a whole story about Che and me and the whole business. Because I'd never had any witnesses, and I forgot to sort of hang out with one. But you take it for granted because you think everybody knows. So long story cut short, that had a huge impact on my life. But when I go back to school, I only said to my friend Boyd, who went on to join the SAS, I should say, by the way, he was a psychopath, but a lovely guy at the time. I said to him about Che, and he was a fanatic. He was the guy we used to call Fidel Boyd. And it was only when I said I'd met Richard Harris that people got interested. Nobody cared about who Che Guevara was. I'm talking about in school. But then when I left college and when I got working for magazines, and then when he went to Bolivia, the whole thing escalated. And I thought, I've got to commemorate this man. He was a hero in my head from the moment I met him, and before as well. And of course, when you see them on the tanks coming into Havana, ousted Batista, they all have long hair and look like hippies. This was my world.
Yeah. Fair play. Okay, I'm going to go to other people. I'll come back to you in a minute, Tom. Any women in the audience? Shout out, Scotch Mark, go right.
I find Celtic art obviously very spiritual because we are Irish, obviously, and very deeply connected to it. And what seems to trigger something in me, like mystical.
Good.
Which piece of art that you have done connects you in that way? I would like to know.
I don't know, but I've just finished, I joined in with some women exhibiting in Trinity at the weekend on Vision Era. And this is what's fascinating. My work has now moved to a slightly different plane. It's in that, my latest work, which I didn't bring here, is called The Divine Feminine. That'll tell you everything. It's a very exalted, non-Celtic work, but it speaks of an image called the White Lady. I won't get into it here. She appears at Newgrange and Fatima Knock.
I've been
Yeah, and she's archetypal. But that whole, I wish I was alive for another 50 years. There's women, and huge numbers of them, who've got involved with what I call, for want of a better word, Celtic mysticism, Celtic spirituality, the divine feminine. And I look at that and think, bring it on. I live in wonderment at what direction my work has taken people.
Newgrange is the most amazing. I went when I was like 9 or something, and it triggered so much in me as an
It
artist.
triggers something in us all if we
And
pay attention.
Yeah, definitely. And then the Cave of Cats, I really want to visit there.
Sorry,
The
I can't hear that.
The Cave of Cats, the Morrigan. I don't know, but
Oh, you hit the
I
bone
think-
there. I'm
yes.
working on my last Celtic work, and guess what it is? The Morrigan.
yes.
But the triple goddess.
She's my, I don't know, she's like the powerhouse that I have within me when I don't have anything left. I just go, what would she do? So I would be really happy to see.
Well, she was like everything. She was a triple goddess. All her gods, the women were all triple, like Eru, who gave her name to Ireland. We also had Banba, we had Fola, we had 3 goddesses. And it's the 3 in 1. So when St. Patrick came here and said, I have a God, he's the Father, Son, the Holy Ghost, I went, yeah.
Yeah.
That's how the conversion happened so quickly and easily, you know?
We had it first. Okay, anybody else? Go, Margaret. Anybody else? Go ahead, go right.
I would like just 2 things. First of all, I would like to thank Jim because we know each other few decades at least.
Through strange
And,
circumstances.
I had written initially to Jim because of internment, and we were doing art, and the book of Conquest was out, and I wanted to ask him permission, would it be alright if we used his artwork, and his generosity of spirit, right away he said, go ahead, more party, and use away there, and we've stayed in touch, but
This was all in the cash in the Xbox.
yeah, and I have quite a bit of Jim's art, of the Book of Conquest, and the see the gentleman here has a Book of Conquest, and I also have the portfolio, you know, of the black and white pieces, and but about 30 years ago, we were up in the house, and we were talking about your stuff, and again you're talking about tattoos, and I had said at the time I was wanting to do 2 pieces around each
Right.
of the things of your stuff, and he says, no problem, I'll do it for you, you know, and so, and I had actually contacted on the phone about a month ago. There was a tattooist coming over from the continent. I really liked his work. It was brilliant.
We're going to get a tattoo in you, are we?
So I actually said to him, I'd be interested for doing it.
Excellent.
I was going to do a big Jim Fitzpatrick on my back.
Good.
So he has tortured me. He's texting me every couple of days. What is it you want? You know, send me photos and all that. So I'm going to get it done.
Yeah, give me a shout when we talk about what we can do.
And,
We'll do something interesting.
Just, I got a text from a guy called Tommy Eccles, who's a former prisoner from Portlaoise, and Tommy said that you went in to see them, and you were extremely generous. You give them permission to put your images on borons, on pictures,
Everything.
on hankies, on the whole work. So
I love
that's
seeing my
something-
work used, but
that's just
especially
a
by
symbol.
the prisoners. You know what we should say with prisoners? It says in the Gospels, you know? We should reach out, you know?
Tomas?
Jim, I'm an old believer in place shapes the mind.
In what?
Place, where we were born.
Oh, right,
we-
place, yes.
Place shapes the mind. And two, your prints reminded me of that tonight. And it reminded me of this place we're in and this part of the Falls Road.
Oh, yeah.
Because a minute from here is the home of James Connolly. And a minute from here in this direction, turn of the 19th and 20th century, there was what was called the Willowbank huts. They were ex-British Army huts. And one of those huts was occupied by the Féin.
Right.
And Countess Markovitz came to visit the Féin.
Really?
Just about a minute or two on the other side of us
Right.
here. So in that sense, your prints, in a sense, they come to circle.
I'll have to give them a Markovitz for here.
Yes, because they remind us, not just, of course, of these individuals, but they remind us of our own political heritage and our role in the historic struggle for independence.
And to remember them as
Democratic
well,
rights.
I mentioned when I did the 7 signatories, and everybody loves Connolly, which is wonderful. But both my grandfathers knew Tom Clark. My grandfather had a studio in O'Connell Street. Tom Clark was on the corner opposite the Rotunda, and then down further was Little Britain Street, and my other grandfather had a pub down there. They were friends with Tom Clark, and I look at Tom Clark and I know the whole story of how he was stripped naked by that RUC officer in the grounds of the Rotunda, and his story has always been, I've always felt it very personal. And then one day, a friend of mine, Andy O'Connor, with Sergio Bonetti, goes to see a painting in, I think it was Belcamp or somewhere like that, one of the religious houses that they're closing down the schools in. And hanging on the wall is one of the greatest paintings ever discovered in history. And the man who owned that his wife had given it to the Jesuit order. I'm talking about the Caravaggio, by the way. And the man who owned it was the man who stripped Tom Clark. And Michael Collins on the spot said, "We'll get him." And one day somebody walked up to his door and shot him dead, and that's why we own a Caravaggio. So the art comes in strange ways.
Okay, now I'm just going to take 2 more observations and then we start to wind up. And Jim has said he'd sign stuff if people want him to. Go right, Carl.
It's
Yeah,
just,
stay on to sign stuff, anybody needs to sign.
it's just what people are saying about Jim giving permission to use art within prisons. I collect and send medical aid to Cuba, and over the last 2 years, Jim has, and even today, has donated signed print to auction to help us with the fundraising. We get the medical supplies for nothing.
For the hurricane in Cuba.
But we're now doing our own. In the last 2 years, we've sent over £2.5 million worth of medical aid.
Okay.
And that's all because
It's not all because of
I have to
the.
sign up this was.
Oh,
Jim
this
gave
is
us
Che, I
permission.
have one of these.
So we can actually develop this with the leads to sell these as well. I had the pleasure to get on.
I'd love to see stuff like that, yeah.
Give Jim a copy of it as well.
Either way. Jim, thanks a million. We're going to meet him all up to the hour. Meet him